That day, there were guests in the house. Polly couldn't quite decide if having guests was very good or not so good. She thought something like this. When there are guests in the house, everything is somehow special. Mom cooks some tasty treats, Dad goes to the store an extra time. If, in addition, one of Polinka's friends comes with the adults, then having guests is very good. But if only adults come, then it's good, but not very, because they will again talk about their uninteresting things, and Polinka will have to play alone. That day was not very good. Adult guests came, and after eating, they started talking about uninteresting things. They were Dad's friends from work. They talked about something and tried to prove something to each other. Polly was playing with her favorite friend Nunya at the time. As you remember, Nunya is a sweet duck, such a tender and soft little duck. She was just explaining to Nunya how to behave when visiting, when suddenly she heard something strange in the adults' conversation that caught her attention. Dad's friend said very loudly, "Well, what do you think? Which came first, the chicken or the egg?" Polly scrunched up a bit. She didn't like eggs, not in any form. She had met chickens a few times when she was at her grandmother's house in the countryside. A big and very noisy bird. Doesn't fly well and talks funny. In short, not a beauty. Although Polly loved birds very much. Take Nunya, for example. You just can't help but love her. And for her birthday, she was given 2 toy talking birds. You could press a button, say something, and the bird would repeat exactly what you said. The main thing was to have batteries. That's why she paid attention to what Dad's friend said about the chicken and the egg. She repeated quietly, "Which came first, the chicken or the egg?" Finally, the noisy guests gathered to go home. Dad's friend said, "How well we've sat! Next time at our place," and he reached for the door handle. Polly was still deciding for herself whether it was a good or boring invitation, but as soon as the guests left, she immediately asked her dad a question. "Dad, which came first, the chicken or the egg?" Did a little chick hatch from an egg first, or did a chicken lay an egg? Chickens don't give birth to eggs, they lay them, Dad corrected. Okay, laid it, Polly agreed. So which was first? Dad picked Polly up, tossed her towards the ceiling, then deftly caught her and immediately sat her on the sofa. "Look here," Dad began. "Your Nunya is a bird, a duck. All living ducks, just like chicks, all birds are born from an egg. Even the tiniest hummingbird and the largest ostrich, they are born from an egg. By the way, do you know what size egg a hummingbird hatches from?" Dad went to the kitchen cabinet, took out a jar of peas. He picked a larger pea and put it in Polly's hand. "Imagine you are holding a hummingbird egg in your hand," said Dad cheerfully. "Only it should be white." Polly looked at the small pea in surprise and then asked, "And what about the egg from which an ostrich is born?" Dad went back to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, took out a chicken egg, placed it in Polly's palm, and showed it to her. "An ostrich's egg is about 30 of these chicken eggs," and then he continued cheerfully, "It's like a small ball." It was evident that Dad enjoyed surprising his daughter. Then he spoke seriously and mysteriously. "God created all the birds on the 5th day of creation. He said, 'Let birds fly in the sky.' What do you think? Who flew in the sky first, eggs or birds? Ha ha ha! Polly laughed. Of course the birds. How could eggs fly without wings? Right, Dad nodded. God created living birds, who then began to lay eggs, from which new birds were born, and so on to our days. Polly thought for a moment, then asked, "And what about butterflies? Are they also birds? They fly and have wings. When did God create them?" As for butterflies, it's hard to say exactly, Dad said slowly. But let's just think. On that same fifth day of creation, God created not only birds, He also created all the fish in the sea and rivers. God created animals like crocodiles, snakes, turtles, lizards. They belong to a class of animals called reptiles. Interestingly, almost all reptiles, with some exceptions, are also born from eggs. Imagine that. Birds from eggs, reptiles from eggs. And here's something else. Fish, which were created by God on the fifth day, are also born from eggs. Because roe, which fish have, is very, very many tiny fish eggs. Only some fish hatch from eggs directly in the water, and others in the mother fish's belly, but also from an egg. Polly looked at her dad with surprised eyes, trying to remember something from his story. Then she suddenly reminded, "Dad, but what about butterflies? Who are they?" Butterflies are insects. They lay eggs, from which larvae hatch, or in the case of the butterfly, caterpillars. The caterpillar then turns into a cocoon, and from it emerges a beautiful butterfly. So let's assume that God also created the beautiful butterflies on the fifth day. Because they both crawl and fly, Dad concluded. Polly took her favorite nunya in her hands, gently pressed her cheek to it. The soft and tender ducky familiarly smelled of something dear and beloved. "Everyone came from an egg," Polly said thoughtfully. "But you, ducky, were sown in a factory. That's what Mom told me. And when we go to the lake, I'll show you live ducks. We can even feed them." Polly looked up and gazed out the window. Outside the window hung a feeder on which a yellow-green tit sat, amusingly turning its head from side to side.